Hey guys, right now I am filming a live stream and we are going to be putting together some sewing patterns during this live stream. And I'm also going to be watching some videos about the new Epstein files that have been released. First of all, I've obviously been changing a lot of the way that I approach content on here. And a lot of that's been related to, I think, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about in this particular video. There are so many things that I've tried to have conversations about on social media, and people didn't want to hear it when it came from me all those years ago. There's a lot about Epstein's direct connections with a lot of the culture war topics that I've discussed over the years that, I already spoke about. I knew that sort of connection was existing, and it's quite frustrating, honestly, to be in a state right now where so many people are kind of like figuring out this thing that I already sort of figured out many years ago, especially because part of my story, part of my experience having these conversations has been that a lot of times people just harass me for talking about it, right? Like a lot of the stuff that I've tried to draw attention to, especially in the context of rape culture, I've been attacked for. I've explicitly been attacked for bringing these things up and speaking about things in the way that I do, especially from the perspective of being a feminist, right? So this is going to be a video where we go over a lot of different topics because there's a lot of things in these files. Part of why I wanted to make this video is because, girl, I'm not going to look at the files, okay? I'm not going to sit and read all of the files. I don't want to do that to myself, right? But I don't want to be completely unaware. And I found a collection of videos of people speaking about their investigations into these files. And so I wanted to watch and react to those videos as we go along today. And I wanted to just share that information for, I'm sure, the other people who also don't want to sit through and go through the files themselves, right? A lot of these creators on this list are creators that I have a lot of respect for. A lot of these people are people who I really appreciate the content that they've published, trying to break down a lot of these topics, trying to break down various other things. So as usual, when you guys see me sharing some of the stuff that, of course, go and follow these content creators. If you enjoy some of the stuff that you see, there's going to be a wide range of things. This is going to not be in any particular order. I'm putting some of these sewing patterns together. I got to do a lot of taping and cutting and printing. So we're going to be here for a bit. So I figured that this would be at least a way for me to do this in a way that was, killing two birds with one stone. I will say before we get into this that I've been very solidly in the headspace as of late of giving myself permission to do the things that I have sort of felt I shouldn't be doing. I've had an issue online of being a person who comes from an era where we were all just kind of incentivized to speak about these things because we were very passionate about these topics. These were topics that were very important to us. A lot of us saw the direction that this country was going in, and some of us wanted to sort of try to counteract that, right? And I've had this sort of like obligation, I guess it feels, to have a lot of the conversations that I've had over the years on this platform and many others, right? I've been at the forefront of a lot of conversations that we've had on the internet. I know I don't really get a lot of credit for that, but I know because many of the things that I've talked about at the time I was talking about them, they were unpopular. And now I've seen and now I've seen an entire industry kind of prop up around some of these unpopular topics. And I think it's amazing. And one of the things I've been kind of doing is try to pull myself out of the old internet mindset that I was in for a bit, where I sort of felt really compelled, really obligated to have certain conversations about these things. I obviously care about a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about, but I didn't allow myself to do some of the creative things I've wanted to do because I've felt obligated to having some of these conversations. And what I've appreciated about the way that I've changed working recently is that, I work maybe a couple of days a month now, and I'm able to publish a lot of content from those couple of days that I'm working, and it's given me a lot more time to do other things. And some of those other things are things that I wish I had started to do many, many years ago. I could have spent his entire previous administration just working on the things that I was passionate about, the creative endeavors that I really wanted to get to. But I felt so obligated to have some of these conversations. And it's not that I don't feel like I didn't help or I didn't, impact people. I know a lot of people have reached out to me and told me as much, and I appreciate you very, very greatly for that. It's just that I had to sort of be honest with myself and say at a certain point that I wasn't giving myself permission to do some of the creative stuff. If we believe in being put on this planet or being put on this earth for a reason, I feel like I was put on this planet for the reason of being the creative soul that I am and actually doing more than I do on here, right? Like, to me, YouTube has always kind of been my job, right? I mean, it wasn't meant to be, but it was my job. But I've realized that I need to start thinking about stuff outside of that, in addition to that, on top of what I'm already doing on here. And so I don't need to overthink in the way that I historically have a lot of the content that I've made. So I've kind of appreciated doing these live streams and, just kind of like hanging out with people and having a more casual approach to the content, because I think it's given me a lot more time to do other things. And I think some of you guys like to hear from me a bit more. So yeah. I am, like I said, going to be cutting out some sewing patterns in this video. Alexander actually is going to be taking me to New Orleans for Mardi Gras this year. This will be our second trip to New Orleans, and I definitely have a bit of sewing that I want to do before I go on that trip. So I'm definitely going to be doing some sewing for the next couple of days, and I have all these patterns that I found from Etsy. I've also enjoyed doing these live broadcasts because I've been able to figure out that I can multitask. I can like hang out with you guys and do something else that I also need to get done. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this live stream. If you want to join me for these live streams while I film them, we're still not at the point where I'm announcing them. I will have to reschedule one of my live streams that I have announced on the 16th. By the time this video goes up, I will have rescheduled that. So please look for that in the comment box below. But if you want to join me for my live streams, please join me on my Spark tier. That is the lowest tier that I have on my YouTube members. And it's the way that you can gain access to my live streams that are membership only. Sometimes I do some live streams for everyone, but I do a lot of my like filming live streams for my members only, just because I like to keep some of the riffraff out of the comment section. So if you want to join me for that, please check on over to my YouTube members. I have really appreciated those of you guys who have become my YouTube members. Thank you so much, those of you guys who jumped on over and became a Spark member. Anyway, I'm going to start queuing up these videos, start cutting out some of these patterns, and we're gonna get to it. From what I've seen from a lot of the stuff that has made it to my feed, what I've seen is that there's actually quite a bit of really, really uncomfortable shit in these new files. So these people are going over a large smattering of these things, and I've got some thoughts and things to say about some of this stuff. I got some things not to say about other stuff, but either way, I thought that this would be kind of a good way to, I don't know, do this together. Those of us who maybe don't want to do it alone. So anyway, let's jump into this. Let's cue this all up. All right.
Sent on Saturday, July 22nd, 2017, titled Fish Photos for Ty. Love the construction photos. Enjoy to see you two having such a fun time. I have photos of the kids sitting inside one of those big claws from way back when we were renovating the house. They love to run around the yard completely naked. And the photo is the two of them sitting in the big claw with no clothes on. Very funny and likely very blackmail worthy. Ha ha ha. XO, Ashley Hull. But then she also sent another email just a few years earlier on July 14th, 2013 at 5:12 p.m. from Ashley Taylor Hull, in which she said, "Hello, everyone." Do you know who everyone includes? It includes not only her own father, but also Jeffrey Epstein. We dropped off a very excited little girl today at ranch camp. She woke up with a jolt this morning and bounced around all morning until we left at 11 a.m. for the 2+ hour drive at Colebrook, Connecticut. We stopped at the little diner for lunch as we have every year. Definitely tradition now. She tells a cute little story about her daughter, I assume, and the little girl who is in her same cabin and where exactly they are sleeping in that cabin. And then she says the way to reach her this week, if you so desire, Camp Jewel YMCA, 6 Proc Hill Road, P.O. Box 8, Colebrook, Connecticut, 06021. Attention of some name Bunk Clydes. I will email you with a new bunk number next week as she will move to traditional resident camp. If you would like to view photos of Cassidy and Braden during their camp stay, go to the following link. Wow, that's so nice of you to include a link to photos of your children that you sent to Jeffrey Epstein. The children that appear to be in your profile picture. The desire for me to message her on LinkedIn is so strong. It's so fucking strong. I just want to ask her, did your dad know that you were sending photos of your own kids, his grandchildren, to Jeffrey Epstein?
So that is absolutely repulsive. It's repulsive and then it's depraved, right? It's sad because these people, all they want is money, right? They care so little about their own children. They care so little about the vulnerable kids in their care that they're basically like teeing them up to be abused by him, you know? And it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And I have to be honest, you know, there's a lot of conversation about adoption and fostering in this new Epstein leak, right? And even though my adoptive parents weren't perfect, I am very thankful to them. You can see my parents behind me. Actually, they're in heaven now. But I mean, I'm an atheist, but you know what I mean. They're at least in the happy part of my brain, right? And I'm thankful for them because when you listen to a lot of these stories, you really get the sense that a lot of this really only went bad because the parents helped, right? A lot of times the parents were the ones providing the children. I know that there was another email where they're basically like, oh, we'll be in this room and this is the door or whatever. They were literally feeding their children to these predators. And I don't even think much, if anything, is going to be done about it. And, you know, for me, you got to have to think about, like, why are they releasing this if nothing's going to be done about it, right? I do think to some degree there is a desire to kind of traumatize us a little bit with this stuff. You know, I feel less traumatized because it happened to me, right? Even though it's upsetting to hear, it's not surprising to hear. It's something I kind of hope people hear and start to believe, you know, people like me, when we speak out about this shit.
So these are screenshots from a journal of one of Epstein's victims, and the girl talks a lot in coded language. As you can see here, this is kind of how she wrote, and she writes in these journals, but it's a pretty easy code to decipher. I deciphered a bunch of these pages. But the really disturbing thing throughout these journals is that she talks about multiple perpetrators. She names perpetrators, like the executives at AOL, Leon Blaque, a good friend of Epstein's. There are many more too. But this girl constantly talks about death, about murder, about her babies being taken away from her, about her being forced into these traumatic procedures that were extremely gruesome and bloody. There are also pictures of what I can assume are potentially her babies, her sonograms. And yeah, I mean, you can pause and read all of these pages. There are so many of them. I just spent the last hour reading through these journals for a video that I'm producing on my channel. And I was on the verge of tears throughout most of it. I mean, it's really, this is horrific stuff. Some of the pages she has drawn to and splattered with ink like this, or like this with some of her code. Here are some of the pages translated though. Tomorrow is the halfway ultrasound for Jeffrey. This one stuck. After they took the first baby who survived in the early miscarriage, I think it was called, I no longer feel like a person but a vessel. Will they take this one too? Who has the first one? Where did Ghislaine go? I can't let myself get attached. My body feels so tired. Will I ever be free? So then in another page of coded writing, she writes, I am such a monster. I didn't console her. I can't unhear her screams. They haunt me. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her. I am a monster. I deserve to be haunted by her screams. I am so sorry. I am so broken. Another page here, she describes the doctor who was from Israel, and she describes the procedure. This was different, a shot, and those rod-like things had a hook and so much pain. Blood and water all over the bed, and she was wrecked, like a feeling when your tummy hurts and you have to push. I saw her fingers, this tiny head and body in the doctor's hands. It reached its tiny arm up and had a tiny foot. I closed my eyes and no more. No more cries. I don't understand. They yelled and screamed, and he said it will be the same in a couple of months. I don't understand what is going on. I can't go to school like this. I can't stop shaking. Yeah, so to me, it sounds like this girl was being impregnated over and over again, starting at the age of probably 13 or 14. And then when she was having these babies, they were being taken from her and immediately brought into the world of a pedophile ring or sex trafficking organization. There are so many things in these journals that are so twisted.
Oh my God. But it's so, I hate that none of this is surprising to me. And I guess as I'm watching this stuff, I keep thinking like, yeah, that's about what I thought. I'm kind of sad that there's a part of me that expects this, that kind of is so used to this shit that like none of it is shocking to me at all. I wonder what kind of person I'd be if I was able to suspend my disbelief and believe that these people weren't. But yeah, that is very, very sad.
I desperately want this girl's story to be heard because I feel like it's so buried underneath all this more sensationalized parts of it. But I also think it would be exploitative and kind of inappropriate for me to make a series of just me reading out all of her trauma that she experienced in captivity, having babies for Jeffrey Epstein. But out of all the pieces related to her that were released, one thing I think would feel more appropriate to share is a journal from when she was in residential treatment center, ostensibly for an eating disorder treatment, but really it was for the purpose of rescuing her, getting her away from Jeffrey Epstein, and giving her a place to process her trauma. And I think this one's more appropriate to share, first of all, because it's hopeful in that she is getting better and you can see she's around people who care for her. But we also still witness and hold space for the very clear psychological impact that the trauma of being with Jeffrey and Ghislaine has on her. And it's devastating to see how immediately after being in captivity, she actually still struggles to believe that Ghislaine Maxwell did anything wrong to her. I went through all of this and annotated it for parts that showed kind of who she was as a person. She was so sweet and kind and empathetic. So I wanted to highlight some of those parts and just share that because I don't want this to just to be about her suffering. And then I also annotated parts that show, the damage and the impact of what she went through. But I do still think the magazine cutout poetry that she made in her journal in captivity is fascinating and devastating. But it's also more appropriate to share because it's not explicitly like describing her trauma. So I'll keep those rotating in the background, but just know that what I'm reading is her journal from after being rescued. So this is her being sent to a treatment center in Florida. I wanted to scream and cry because I haven't been back to Florida since my last time with Ghislaine and Jeffrey. And so that was so scary. And I didn't want to have a male therapist. I felt scared to be on a plane with so many other people since I was always on private planes, but I think I liked it better, more safe. That was so sad. It's like this little girl and she'd only ever flown on private jets because she had lived her whole life being exploited by billionaires. She's like such a kind girl. I don't know why people make fun of Spirit Airlines because they were the only ones who were so nice about and accommodating with my autism. They made sure to seat me in the front row and had a flight attendant stay with me the entire time. She could tell I was scared, so she introduced me to the pilot. And I kept looking around to make sure it wasn't one of Jeffrey's pilots or that he would be the co-pilot, but it wasn't. I started getting really scared once we landed because I had to meet a driver and I was fearful that maybe this was a setup. And when I got off the plane, I'd see Mr. Juan or maybe Ghislaine. The drive was super scary. The man was nice, but the car was too much like Ghislaine's. He was nice, but it was hard because I was trying to stop the memories and I started to have internal panic as I was looking out the window because it looked so much like we were heading straight to Jeffrey's house. And I really started to think I'd been set up and we'd soon see his stupid, gross, disgusting pink mansion. He would try to talk on the way, I think to try to make me more comfortable, but I couldn't manage because I was becoming more and more convinced he was kidnapping me and I would have to face Jeffrey again. The campus is beautiful, but the pool reminds me too much of bad things, so I won't be going to that. She can't even see a pool because she has spent so much time at these disgusting billionaires' mansions with pools. I highlighted this because I thought it was sweet and it made me happy. The girls are so understanding and they're super nice. They know I'm autistic and they all try to make me feel like I belong. I don't like to go to the groups outside of the healing garden or the other building because I get so much panic that I think Jeffrey or Delane will just pop up. I went to the art building, which has 2 floors, so I went to the top floor to see if I could see Mar-a-Lago or the top of his gross house. Also, throughout this journal, if you've been to eating disorder treatment, you know it's pretty common to write notes and messages to each other as part of structured treatment, like to support each other. So throughout, there's these really sweet messages from the other girls, and it was really nice to see how supported she was. Someone said, "You're such a beautiful, kind person and a loving mother." And that was just like, oh my God, my heart, because this girl, you know, she's so devastated about this. She was just held in captivity, having babies for Jeffrey Epstein. Her child was taken from her. And this other girl picked up on how devastating and significant and meaningful that was to her, the experience of having been a mother for 5 minutes. And she told her she was a loving mother. And I can't imagine what that meant to her. Okay, these parts are so upsetting to read because you can see that she still kind of has Stockholm syndrome in the way she talks about Ghislaine. She's talking about another girl in treatment that she felt safe enough to share what happened. I've slowly started to tell her what happened with Jeffrey and Ghislaine and why nighttime is especially hard here. She's so sweet and just listens, even with all my weird pauses. But there are times where I can tell that she doesn't really think Ghislaine is very good. She doesn't want to upset me. She seems to be so much older than me because she seems wise beyond her years, but she's also very, very sad. I pretty much told her everything. She seemed so upset by everything that I felt. I know she's safe, but she kept asking me if I understood that nothing that Ghislaine did was normal in any family setting. But I tried to explain to her that she didn't understand. I have a feeling that she didn't believe that Ghislaine didn't know about anyone else but Jeffrey. She would try to speak really gently and calmly that it didn't make sense for her to be so close and to not know, especially since so many men were up from the city and the fact that I met her and Jeffrey up near the city. But I started getting really, really super distressed. I genuinely felt like I was dying of a heart attack. She doesn't think I have a full understanding and thinks one day I'll need and want to process it with a grown-up. And when, if I'm ready, she wouldn't explain the things she felt I didn't understand. This is her talking about her therapist. I'm learning to trust him more and more, even though he's a man. I'm still terrified that Jeffrey will walk through the door at any moment. There's a moment where her therapist is giving her a sticker as a reward. When he gave it to me, I asked him to put it in the fun book, which he did. And then when he gave it back to me, I happy clapped and quickly realized what I was doing. And he said I immediately had to change in body language and look distant and sad and asked why something made me so sad if it was happy. I wanted to tell him how even being here is traumatic and that I'm so scared that Jeffrey is around every corner. But then I remember the rules. I remember the promise I made. All that came out was that it was sad because someone I spent a lot of time with would do happy claps and they live close to here, but I couldn't say anything else. She's talking about Jeffrey Epstein, that he would do happy claps. She couldn't even enjoy a celebratory moment. I'm walking down the hallway, I hear a voice, and I could have sworn on anything it was Jeffrey. It sounded identical to him, and I was just devastated because I was certain he'd found me, and I was going to have to pay for what I did. So I just completely froze and didn't move while frantically searching for somewhere to hide. She ends up hiding under a table and passing out. How in the hell am I supposed to have quote-unquote radical acceptance of these things? It's a horror story that I survived. Why was I allowed to survive? Am I a monster? I don't know if Ghislaine should be in there. Jail. Miss Erin thinks so, Carrie thinks so, but what am I missing? Why won't Miss Erin say? I don't want to radically accept. I want to know why. What could I possibly learn from this? Wow, and I will leave you with this. This is a cutout from a magazine with a courtroom. It's for lawyers. It's saying, you should never be here alone. Isn't you should never be on the stand alone. And she wrote, he should be. Because yeah, I hope she is out there somewhere safe. I desperately want this girl's story to.
So what I have uncovered over the last couple of days has the potential.
Yeah, that was rough. That was really rough to hear. Wow. Wow. You know, some of these files are hard because the feelings are so familiar. This story is interesting to me in a lot of different ways because you kind of get a whole scope of a lot of things, right? You have a lot of examples of the difference between the way our society engages with these issues and how people actually experience them, and then how the people who commit them actually feel about them and what they actually do, right? Like Epstein and a lot of people like him, right? They would probably deny all of this to your face. But in their heart of hearts, they are willing to go an incredibly far extent to make sure that they can continue to do what they want to do to the vulnerable, right? And it's all this kind of game. And I think when you're a survivor, you experience that. You kind of get the sense that certain people have learned that they can game the system and abuse a certain amount of people and basically face no punishment for it. And this guy, he got so cocky about it. He had a whole island where he invited a bunch of famous people, right? And yes, obviously he was Mossad and all these other things, but still, right? Like this guy had boldness to him, you know? In a lot of these stories, there's a conversation, a lot of these files, rather, there's conversations about them going to Disney. He even took some of these kids to Disney World, right? It's so hard to hear from a survivor exactly what it felt like to deal with the trauma afterwards. She talks in this about being fearful of men, right? There are young men who would hear her say that she's fearful of men. And those men would shame her for saying that out loud and making other men feel bad about it, right? And then when she's encouraged to be quiet about it, she gets to just sort of have that on her own. She gets to kind of experience that by herself in an isolated way. And that can contort into these really dangerous, dark, upsetting emotions, right? Where you feel like you kind of deserved it because it happened to you. And if these people were able to get away with it and, you know, nothing was really done, well, and you're still sitting with the pain, well, maybe it was your fault, right? Maybe it did happen to you because it was meant to happen to you. That's the way you think of it, even if it's not a true thing or a realistic feeling. Do you know what I mean? It's really hard to be a person who survives this and isn't believed, which a lot of times, like I said, because these people are rich, they're never going to be, right? The people who are harmed by them are never going to be believed, right? Because the people who did it were rich, right? Wow. That was really hard to listen to.
As someone who was sex trafficked as a child, there's something I wanted to say about the fight for the release of the Epstein files. I first want to say how much I appreciate everyone who is fighting for that because they want to fight for justice for the victims of the Epstein sex trafficking. I was not part of that. But sex trafficking is something that's part of our fabric. No matter what country you're in, it's there in more places than you would ever imagine. It's not simply about holding this group of people responsible who were involved in the Epstein files. It's much bigger than that. But I appreciate that so many of you want to fight for justice and accountability, and you believe in a system that stands with victims. But having been a victim of sex trafficking, and for me, that meant sex trafficking in my own community growing up with some powerful people, pillars of the community. people that were never held accountable and never will be. Those that are still alive, most of them are dead or have dementia. My truth is, every time the fight for the Epstein file release becomes public, and it's another letdown by the system, it's a reinforcement for me that we don't really matter, that the system is always going to side with the powerful men and women sometimes who perpetrate these crimes against children. And so it's exhausting for me. I can't imagine the people that are in the Epstein files that are actual victims and have this playing out over and over, how exhausting it must be for them and how hard it must be to survive. Because just for me, I'm not even related to the Epstein case, except for I have been sex trafficked as a child, and I get it. And I know what that's like. And I know how the powerful are protected. And people don't challenge those people. And the system protects them. And it's exhausting to fight. And so for me, it's been a better strategy to give up on seeking justice and just work on survival. So know when you're fighting that it does take a toll on the people who are the victims to see over and over and over that we're never going to get justice.
Yeah, so when you look into a lot of what's in the files, one of the things you really, really start to see is from the front end to the back end, you've got people who are trying to make it hard for women specifically to be heard, right? You've got men who were accused of sexual assault who reached out to Epstein, who complained to him about how they were being portrayed and how they were being misunderstood and how they were essentially innocent, or if it did happen, it should have happened, right? And you can see like him giving advice, right? And then you look into what they were saying about, some of these people were saying about misogyny in certain spaces, right? Shout out to Rebecca Watson, who made a video about this very recently because she's mentioned in the files, because she called out some of the misogyny in the atheist spaces in the 2000s, right? Something that I've also done in my own way. And I remember exactly how a lot of this went back then when you call out and people just, you know, they refused to acknowledge it. They refused to see it. They refused to hear it. Right. And most of the time, what are we talking about? We're usually talking about women who are sharing their direct experiences with this shit. Right. So you've got already this environment where this thing is happening. Someone's trying to draw attention to this thing happening. Then there's a group of people who think that they're above that sort of thing, while also understanding that they are very much not, right? Who will try to essentially just silence these women so these abuses can keep happening, so this misogyny can be normalized, right? And what's crazy about a lot of the stuff in this Epstein drop is that so much of it is related to all of the culture war bullshit we've had around that, right? So as a survivor, especially as someone who's spoken out about this shit on social media, right? It can be really, really hard to be optimistic about the state of things. It really can be, because all you see over and over again is these people get away with it. For the most part, society doesn't care. They say they do. Society says that they care. People like to say that they care. But what a lot of people don't understand about rape culture is that it is essentially this situation where the things that keep these things from continuing to happen are not ever really truly broken down. And so there's a culture that sort of leaves a little bit of space for sexual violence. There are direct connections to this, right? People who were called out for sexual violence, who turned to Epstein for advice, who then denied that there was any existence of misogyny or sexual violence within these spaces, only to later have been revealed to have these issues. And you know, what's frustrating is, like, as a survivor, as a former sex worker, right? Like, there's just some shit that I've never been able to deny about men. It's why I don't fall for their protecting women bullshit, because I know that at the end of the day, one of the direct parallels with that, you know, is this idea of a very, very pure woman, right, who maintains a certain degree of chastity. And for these men, that will always end up being ideally a young girl, right? So this stuff is all kind of connected. And, you know, I had some very uncomfortable experiences when I was a minor, right? So it's like, there's just some shit I've not been able to pretend wasn't about this society. And that's part of what informs a lot of the shit I talk about on here, right? As a survivor, it gets really discouraging to, you know, you see these stories come out and nothing happens, right? And what do we think would happen, right? Our society likes to believe that if this stuff comes out, if the information was just shared, if, you know, people just had the proof, things would happen. And people pat themselves on the back for the idea that these things happen, right? But the reality is, even when there is proof, even when there's undeniable evidence of someone doing something sexually violative to another person, the most a lot of people get is a slap on the wrist. And for a lot of people, the slap on the wrist is something they can buy themselves out of. And what you see within these files is that's what they did effectively. A lot of them effectively bought their way out of it. Some people even gave their children over to buy themselves out of situations, right? It's sick. And it's stuff that, again, someone like me has never really been able to ignore about society.